Hello, my name is Dan Skipbound, and this is the Top 5 Weekly, where myself and some guests will discuss a topic. We will run down our top 5 in that topic in order from 5 to 1. And this week, in honor of Robert Deniro, I meant Martin Scorsese and The Irishman, and of course, who's in that movie directed by Martin Scorsese? It's Robert De Niro. So in honor of The Irishman, we're going to be talking about Mr. Robert De Niro, my favorite actor of all time. And I have two great guests with me to discuss his performances and movies and so forth. Mr. Kirk Kalikowski and Mr. Andrew Cabral, which both previously were on other episodes of the Top 5 Weekly. But Kirk, welcome back. Thank you for coming back on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Dan. I had a lot of fun last time and got another great topic. Again, this is another one where I think there's not a lot of ways you can get this wrong. Like you said, one of the greatest actors of all time and a lot of great performances to choose from.
And Mr. Andrew Cabral, welcome back. Welcome back. I mean, Andrew used to be on the show in the first incarnation of the Top 5 Weekly, but he's consented to come on again, so I feel good about that.
Thank you for having me back on once again. It's good to be back. Yeah, it's been quite a little while since we had done this song and dance, but I'm glad to be back talking about Robert De Niro. It's gonna get interesting. I'm curious to see if we all have the same movies, but we'll find out in a few seconds.
Yeah, I mean, Kirk said it's hard to get it wrong, but it's also of an actor that's been acting for 50 years. I think. Not to take away anybody's thunder, but Mean Streets came out in 1972 or 74 in there somewhere. So the guy's been acting for nearly 50 years of things that we have seen him in. So there's a lot of movies to choose from, and he's done a lot of different kinds of things: drama, sports movies, comedies. So it's going to be interesting to see what you guys have picked. And with that, let's get this thing started. Kirk, what is your number 5?
My number 5 is a movie that has some of the greatest scenes, some bits and pieces of greatest scenario I've seen, and that is The Deer Hunter.
I do not have The Deer Hunter, and I'm now kicking myself. I cannot believe I did not put The Deer Hunter in. Michael. His name is Michael.
Yep. And in the Andrew, you didn't have that, did you?
No, I did not.
Okay. Deer Hunter. I put this on the list honestly because of two scenes, the opening and the finale Russian roulette scenes. That first scene with him and Christopher Walken is, I think, one of the greatest things that's ever been committed to film. The intensity and the emotion they bring to those performances are just mind blowing. And like I said, just I think if I had to nail down the most well acted scene in the movie, that might be it. I just love watching that and what they bring out of that and how real they are, the real emotion that comes out of the situation there. That's not easy to do, to really capture the dread and the fear and the terror of what you're going through, that and the adrenaline that comes with that. They capture it all so well. It's number 5 because honestly, those two scenes are what really stand out to me. The performance in the middle is good, but there's nothing I could look at and say, "Wow, that's great, that's awesome." It's pretty, it's good. It's run of the mill De Niro, which is great, but it's nothing that really pops. So that's why this only makes my number 5, but it's still great performance.
I'll tell you what. I mean, I said I was kicking myself. I mean, I absolutely love The Deer Hunter. His character Michael goes through so many ups and downs in that film with his girlfriends and his friends, and and it's really, and I could honestly, I know you didn't bring this up, Kirk, but it really, I can see why you would relate to this character because it's from where you come from. It's Pennsylvania. They work in like a
steel mill,
a working class town. To me, I could see why you would relate to this film with so much.
Yep.
About because I know people from Pittsburgh and I know people from that part of the country.
Yeah.
And this nailed that part of the country and that working class people so well.
They drink a lot of Iron City in that movie.
yeah. Well, no Yingling, I take it, huh? But Andrew, you got any thoughts about the Deer Hunter?
Oh yeah, the Deer Hunter is one of the all-time great films, at least in from American movie history perspective. I think it came out in 1978, Best Picture winner, directed by Michael Cimino. One of his great films. After that, I think he had done like Heaven's Gate, which kind of like derailed his career for a little while because it was such a long and bloated movie. This film also stars the late John Cazale in one of his few films that he was in. I think he was only in like he was in both Godfathers and then Dog Day Afternoon and Deer Hunter and
Conversation.
in The Conversation. That's a hell of a filmography. Dan's holding up the 5, so I guess he was in 5 movies. He was underrated actor, great actor. Meryl Streep is also in the movie, an early role for her. Her and John Cazale were an item at the time. She's talked about him many, many times. John Cazale is also great friends with Al Pacino. And of course, it's a really, really interesting film about not only about just kind of those types of people that are in the film when it comes to the characters, but like just that generation of the Vietnam generation, because all the male actors in the film go to Vietnam and it changes their lives forever. I like of how there's a before, during, and after, like part of that movie, and it's so different. You know what I mean? Like before then, I believe there's a wedding and everybody's happy and everybody's just like joyful and they're all have like such a positive outlook on life, and then they go to Vietnam and it just destroys their lives, and then afterward it's just showing the remnants of that. And that happened to a lot of veterans who went to Vietnam during that time and whatnot. It's a really fascinating kind of look at that specific generation of people. So yeah, Deer Hunter's a fantastic movie.
Yeah, Michael, what a great character. I cannot believe I forgot to put that on there. Sure. All right, Andrew, go. What's your number 5?
Mine is The King of Comedy.
That's
Anyone
what
we're gonna wait on that one.
We'll wait on that.
We're gonna wait on that one. So we're going to me. When I talked, I alluded to at the beginning that De Niro he's just not known for his like violent characters or his sports movies or his gangster characters or so forth like that. He actually has a comedy bone in his body, and it's so weird that you don't think of De Niro, even though he's done so many great comedies. I guess not so many, but he's done enough great comedies to where you're like, okay, this guy's got he kind of has that comedy bit to him. And I put Meet the Parents, Jack Burns. I'll tell you what, when I saw this movie for the first time, I was amazed because I'm like, oh my God, he's so funny. And he's the straight guy, but he's so funny. I'm watching you. I'm keeping, that whole thing. And Ben Stiller plays off on that character so well. And I was like, I mean, you know what? You got to reward him for going to these and I can't remember, is it Jay Roach that did the Fokker movies and the Meet the Parents movies, or is it Jay I can't remember the director, but I'm definitely probably wrong. I don't think it's Jay Roach.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, I probably should have it in front of me, but I'm not. But I love Jack Burns, and he's just got this CIA or FBI.
It was Jay Roach. He also
okay, good. I got it right.
He also did the Austin Powers movies.
Oh, wow. Well, I'll tell you what, boy, he's got a nice little filmography, Jay Roach does. But Kirk, you got any thoughts about Jack Burns?
Yeah, I do like the like you said, the way he takes this role, the way he plays a straight man, and the chemistry between him and Ben Stiller is pretty good. I didn't put any of his later comedic roles on my list just because I feel like at this point it's almost, I think he's leaning a little heavy on, parodying a lot of what he's done in the past and, drawing the comedy out of that. And it's funny. But I just don't think it stands up to, a lot of his dramatic roles that he'd done earlier.
No, fair. That's a fair assessment. Andrew?
Yeah, when I first saw it when I was much younger, it came out in 2000, so I was like, I don't know, 13. I probably saw it around that age. It's funny. Like I said, the chemistry between he and Robert De Niro is hilarious. Unfortunately, it's one of those movies where like they didn't really need to give us a sequel, let alone give us two sequels. And so it had like the law of diminishing returns after that. But it showed a different side of De Niro because De Niro hadn't quite done a comedy up to that point. I think he was coming off of like Casino at that point or something like that. So it was nice to see him kind of flex and do different things in his acting repertoire.
Yeah, well, I think he did the Analyze movies either before it or very shortly after it.
Right.
So he kind of had two little comedy trilogies or comedy movies going there at the same time. All right, so we're going to number 4, which is Kirk's number 4 now. Kirk's number 4.
My number 4 is his role as Vito Corleone in The Godfather Part 2.
I have that on my list.
I another one that I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing here?
There's so many to choose from. It's hard.
And I thought to myself, should I put Vito Corleone, even though he won an Oscar?
Mm-hmm.
But I resonate more with Brando's Vito Corleone, so that's why I didn't do it. All right, so I do not have it. All right, Andrew, what do you have at number 4?
I have Heat at number 4.
We gotta wait a second. No, I do not have Heat. I thought I had it.
Oh,
no,
I have it in my
honorable
mentions.
Yeah, Heat is the film where he famously played opposite Al Pacino. He's a robber, he's a heist guy, and Al Pacino plays a cop that's basically trying to hunt him down throughout the whole movie. And it's directed by Michael Mann, probably Michael Mann's most well-known movie, came out in 1995, which seems like a very, very long time ago. But of course, everyone remembers the scene that they have at the diner together where they're just kind of just measuring each other up and just going at each other verbally, but not like aggressive. They're just like trying to one-up each other. Intellectually, it's a cat and mouse game throughout it. There's some personal stuff that's also happening within the movie. This film also has Val Kilmer, Jon Voight, Tom Sizemore is in the film. Ashley Judd's in the film. Very young Natalie Portman is in the film. She plays, I think, the stepdaughter of Al Pacino or Al Pacino's girlfriend's daughter, something like that. And she has her own host of problems. It's a rather long movie, but you don't quite feel it. It clocks in at about 2 hours and 50 minutes, which does seem long even by modern, modern context. But I've always really liked Heat. I think Heat is kind of like a modern classic. Everyone just kind of talks about it with great reverence, and I've always liked Al Pacino, Robert De Niro's performance in it. I almost got them two mixed up. Coincidentally, they're both in Godfather Part 2, which we almost just brought up again. Not playing opposite each other, but playing like each other's family members in different time frames. Interesting how they play opposite each other a couple of more times after this, but I think this is the one so far that is the one everybody remembers. Maybe The Irishman will be the one that eclipses it. That remains to be seen.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Neil McCauley in Heat, he's a criminal, but you see his personal side and his relationship with his girlfriend or whatever and stuff. And then that classic scene, and I knew the daggone name of the restaurant, and now I forget the name of the restaurant. I even think that might have been a trivia question at some point. I don't know if I wrote it or somebody else wrote it, but that restaurant scene is one of the all-time great scenes in movie history. And Michael Mann, I mean, his movies, what I like about them are they're like, they look real. Like you could actually live in his movies. That's how realistic. Even when he did Public Enemies, oh my God, this looks like it's actually happening. Even though these guys are dressed in this garb from the 50s or whatever, But Michael Mann's movies have a reality to them that not a lot of filmmakers can capture. Maybe that's the camera or whatever he uses. But I love Neil McCauley in Heat. What do you think about Neil McCauley in Heat? Kirk?
I think it's pretty good. I think the one my biggest gripe against Heat, and it's a very good movie, But I think Andrew kind of was alluding to it. Reading off all those cast members, all those side characters, you do have that one great scene between the two of them, between Pacino and De Niro in that diner in the middle of the movie. But beyond that, the film really gets bogged down, and the focus gets taken away from them, I think, because all those subplots, those side characters. I wish there was more of the two of them doing what they do. And I think this is a personal opinion of mine. I watched that movie, and I almost wish they had cast the opposite. I wish I'd like to see De Niro as the cop and Pacino as a criminal. I think it would have been really interesting to see them play those different characters. That kind of distracts me whenever I watch the movie. It's not a bad movie. It's not a bad choice to put on the list. Can't argue with it all. But those are just my reasons for not having it in my top 5.
Yeah, no, but that's valid. That's valid. My number 4 is a remake of a classic, and De Niro takes a role that was really, really done great by Robert Mitchum, I believe, and that is Max Cady and Cape Fear. Does anybody have?
I have it. Yeah,
okay,
I got it on my list.
That above 4.
Yeah.
You want to hear something crazy? I initially had it in my top 5, and then I took it out. But go on.
So all right. So if you have it and I have it at 4, all right. So that means we're going to go back to Kirk for his number 3, I believe.
Yes, and I'm very sure I won't get to talk about this yet because my number 3 is Travis Bickle and Taxi Driver.
Oh yeah, I have it.
No,
okay.
I don't have that. So that means
we're running into traffic jams there.
Right, cool. Now we're going to go to Andrew's number 3.
My number 3 is The Godfather Part 2.
Which means you and both Kirk can talk about that because you both have that.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, well, The Godfather Part 2, I think, needs no introduction or needs no real context. It's the sequel / Part 2 to The Godfather. This, of course, tells the story of Vito Corleone in a flashback form with Robert De Niro, and then Michael Corleone in I guess you can quote unquote present time. It's not really present time, but just the origins of Vito Corleone portrayed by Robert De Niro. In the first film, he was portrayed by Marlon Brando famously, and the film jumps back and forth, and you see the origins of Vito Corleone, and Robert De Niro plays it extremely well. He won an Oscar for this movie, I think, for Best Supporting Actor. It's The Godfather Part 2. It's kind of tough to really tell people about it because you kind of just have to tell people, just watch The Godfather and make up your own mind about it, because it's such a massive film. And especially when you combine the first part and the second part, you really don't need to give a damn about the third part. You really don't, unless you're a completist. It has its merits, but I think these two parts together make the full Corleone family epic that it is. And Robert De Niro is really part of that. And it came out during a time when Robert De Niro wasn't a known actor quite yet. It came out before Taxi Driver, before all the other stuff he had done with Martin Scorsese. At the time, I think he had only really had done Mean Streets around that same time, so he was kind of a young, unknown actor at that time, and this was kind of a really big coming out performance for him.
Kirk?
What I love about this performance is that you're coming off Godfather Part 1, and you had Marlon Brando create that iconic character, and you really don't know too much about him. You hear people talking about him and kind of inferring things he's done. So I mean that's a big weight, a big responsibility to come in and kind of flesh that character out, and create that character as an actual active human being instead of someone who's just kind of sitting back at where he was at the point that Brando played him. And he does such a great job. I love the fact that he, the way he can go from, peaceful, friendly family man to killer like that, the way he just turns it off and on, and just how slick he is about it is so great. He really does bring weight to that character and just really informs the legacy of Vito Corleone, and the fact also that he did it all almost entirely in Italian, and it's hard to do to really express your performance in a language that your audience doesn't speak. So the fact that he was able to overcome that barrier as well is just a fantastic performance.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to mention, Kirk, about his performance. Even though I had him in my I had that in my honorable mentions. I think I had it at 6 or 7 or whatever. And he's so subtle. Everything he does as young Vito Corleone is just so subtle. And in the things he does, his movements with his hands and a lot of that stuff. And that's something you don't see De Niro doing that kind of acting a lot, but obviously in that role, it really worked a lot because he needed the subtlety of the character, not the just the explosions of which he's had in so many other of his characters. And that's probably what got him the role, because probably not a lot of people could do that kind of subtle acting, that soft spoken side at the beginning, So yeah, that was, I mean, you only have 5 spots. And
exactly.
And I wanted to try to.
Got to narrow it down somehow.
Yeah. All right. So that means that was your number. Was that your 3, Andrew?
Yeah, that was my 3.
Okay. So we go to my 3, which was Rupert Pupkin, The King of Comedy. Who had that?
I think
you did.
I had it.
You had it at 5. I have it higher.
Right. I had it at 5.
Oh, and you still have it higher than 3?
I still have it higher. Yep. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We can't talk about Rupert Pupkin. All right. So that means we go to Kirk's number 2.
My number 2 is Max Cady in Cape Fear.
All right. So that means you and I can both talk about that then.
Sure.
So go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I love this character. I love the fact that he's right. Like that's the best villain. The best villain is the one who knows he's right. And you watch this movie, he's like, yeah, his actions are wrong, but his motivation and why he's doing it is right. I mean, Nick Nolte's completely in the wrong, completely did this guy dirty, and he has it coming. And just that voice and that gait and everything he creates about this character is so menacing and so charming and so dangerous at the same time. I've never seen a character like that in a movie before, where you could just be so, like I said, like you almost want to be friends with him, but at the same time he's going to slit your throat if he has to, and you don't. This comes to a point where this is what, like early 90s, is like post Goodfellas,
early 80s, right? Cape Fear movies?
Cape Fear, I think, is 1990 or 91.
Okay, so this is right around the time of Goodfellas.
Yeah, 91.
And you don't see De Niro doing a lot of acting like this. I mean, he's at the point in his career where he's almost kind of locked into that Goodfellas casino gangster kind of character, and this is a complete departure from that. I mean, you don't see him at this point either just fully creating a character, and that's what he does. He does such a beautiful job. And he's a guy that every second he's on screen, you're terrified, you're nervous of what he's going to do next, and he's always surprised you. It's such a great character.
No, you're right. I mean, you don't know what the heck Max Cady is. When he gets out of prison, he means business, first of all. And then, but the clothes that he dresses, like they're in some kind of like resort area of Florida, from what I get, or Georgia, from what I gather. And he's in these like tropical shorts, shirts, and he's having a good old time. He's got these crazy hats on. He's driving his little red Camaro. You're like, look at this guy. He's got. You see him working out. He's ripped to shreds. And he's got tats all over his body and stuff. And then, like you said, the accent. I mean, he gets the Southern drawl going. And I mean, one of my favorite quotes of all time is when I'm watching movies. And I'm not big on quotes. I can't remember quotes that much, but one was like, come out, wherever you are. I love that when because he's got Nick Nolte, and Nick Nolte's basically peeing in his pants. He's like, oh no, please don't come over here. Please don't come over here. He's hiding behind a dumpster. And and it's got, I mean, Jessica Lange, Nick Nolte, Juliette Lewis. And that's like the first thing Juliette Lewis had done, I think, one of the first. She was just playing this little innocent girl. Yeah. And the other thing about Cape Fear you got Robert Mitchum and
I think Martin, not Martin Balsam, is he?
Gregory Peck.
Yeah, Gregory Peck.
Yes. In it in cameos. Yeah. So they get the 2 actors from the original Cape Fear to come in and do cameos before they both passed away, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I mean, he does some of these kind of thriller movies later on in his career after this, but this is the one that really, you're like, yeah, he's doing something different, which is really cool.
Yeah.
That's what I love about Max Cady. That's why I had him on my list. Okay, so that was Max Cady was my number 4, and Kirk's what number? What?
That was my 2.
Your number 2. So we got to go to Andrew's number 2.
Yeah, my number 2 is Raging Bull.
All right, so we got to hold off on Raging Bull just now. So my number 2 is now Travis Bickle, which we all have, I take it?
I have him higher than 2.
You have Travis Bickle higher than him 2?
Yeah.
Kirk, where did you have Travis Bickle?
Bickle was my 3.
Okay, and I have him at 2. Andrew has him at higher. So we have to – something's got to give here. What haven't we talked about besides –
Well, I think we have all of our number 1s. I think are on all 3 of our lists. So
yeah.
Or no, I don't have Raging Bull.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't talk. Kirk, where did you have King of Comedy?
King Comedy is my number 1.
Oh,
and that's my number 3.
Okay, yeah, and I think that was Andrew's 5. So you just want to go to that, Dan?
Yeah, let's go to King of Comedy.
Okay. Yeah, we talked about this in the last episode I was on, Dan. How great this movie is, and so this might be a little repetitive, but I love the way De Niro leans as a character. And again, this is so different from anything else he's done. He's playing. It's a semi-comedic character. I mean, or almost like incidentally comedic, not purposely comedic. But the way he leans into that lack of self-awareness. And that there's just that antisocial behavior. The scenes where he's talking to the girl in the bar and he's just straight up lying to her about what he knows and what he does, and the scene where he's in his basement recording his routine and telling the talk show host how to run his show and this is what you do, and and the scene where he goes to his house and he fully believes I think he believes that he belongs there, like he's not lying. Like in his head, they're friends and he belongs there. And just the fact that just how uncomfortable that makes you. I mean, we'll talk about another uncomfortable character he plays in a minute here, but just how uncomfortable he can make you in that role and just commit to that is so fantastic. And I mean, the supporting characters in here, we talked about before about Jerry Lewis, how great he is in this and how they play off each other. And Jerry Lewis is almost a straight man to his to his character, to Nero's character in this one. But yeah, it's so cringy and it's so uncomfortable and it's so much fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, he it's like he's doing it just enjoy just being annoying and being like a pain in the ass to the people watching and the people like Jerry Langford, which is Jerry Lewis's character. Like he's doing it on purpose. He's enjoying making people miserable, the people watching him and the people involved in the thing. And that's what's so great about it. And then Jerry told me to come back. He keeps coming back and he keeps annoying the people at the Jerry Langford show. Then they have to get security to get rid of him. But it's also during a time where things like this you couldn't even get close to coming to some place like that, or you couldn't get close to kidnapping somebody. And he's like, Jerry Langford's like walking to work every day. Like that stuff never doesn't happen anymore with all the crazy stuff going on this day. You could, they probably have 5 security guards around Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel and Colbert. They probably have, there's no way you get close to those guys going to work every day. Even if you try, or Jay Leno or David Letterman or whatever. But Sandra Bernhard is pretty funny.
Yeah, she's good.
But the thing is, those dream sequences are really good because he really believes he's going to be a stand-up comedian, and that's what's so funny about it is when he actually gets the opportunity to do his routine, it's pretty funny. It's not bad, It's not actually a bad routine. It just sometimes it takes a break. You didn't think it was funny?
No, I agree. I was thinking about the fact that how much that influenced Joker. How much of that's really where
yeah.
you see the strong influence of Joker from those like detached from reality scenes. And then obviously the Joker's routine isn't funny, but Pickles is yeah, he has a little bit of talent, but
yeah,
to know about it.
He just needed a chance to get a chance to say it. Once he gets it, what happens, why he ends up having to do it. Now you did you not have King Comedy?
I had it at 5. I had it at 5. Recently on my podcast Cinema Discovery Project with Steven, we did a whole spotlight on King of Comedy. We went like scene for scene, plot for plot point, and we just kind of broke down the Rupert Pupkin character and how interesting he is and how nuanced he is and how he's both he's like lovable, sad, annoying. He's all of those things wrapped into one, and delusional is very much high on his list. And it's just kind of fascinating how people can somehow relate to him, but they don't realize that they may be more like Rupert Pupkin than they think. And that happens a lot where people think certain delusions about themselves, certain egotistical things, and they're not like malicious in any way. Like initially, Rupert Pupkin is not a malicious person. He's kind of driven somewhat to that point of it's not even maliciousness, because when he does do what he does, he's not going to hurt Jerry Langford. I don't think there's anything in his mind that makes him believe he's going to do it. And if it does happen, it would be accidental. He's just in it to get what he wants, and in his mind he deserves what he wants, but he just doesn't understand that that's not the way you do things. He really needs a sense of reality, a reality check, or he needs a lot of therapy. That's what he really needed in the film, and he didn't get that. Sandra Bernhardt's character for me is like the most dangerous one.
Sure.
She is like the obsessive fan. She's like the person who really wants to be heard. She's kind of like the personification of the modern sense of Twitter. People just like yelling and wanting everything they want, and just wanting everything, and just like they feel like they're entitled. It's interesting that Rupert also thinks he's entitled, but it's different than what Sandra Bernhardt thinks. They're kind of like almost like a yin yang, and that's kind of why they end up working together, because the glue that puts them together is their kind of fandom for Jerry Langford. But yeah, Rupert, that film I think has held up extremely well. And I think it's only even gotten better as time has gone on, because the things that are in that movie are really prophetic when it comes to toxic fandom and just like fandom in general, and how it's developed into something that's kind of crazy and chaotic. And Rupert Pupkin is an interesting character even with the modern lens.
Well, not just that, but also just that idea, that obsession with fame. And you brought up social media, just that idea of having the spotlight on you, and what lengths are you willing to go to for people to know your name?
Yeah, and sometimes those things can get dangerous. People like the post Jackass era, where people are throwing themselves off of like tops of houses and things like that just to get clicks and to be famous. That stuff's like wild.
With that being said, Andrew, let's get to your number one, which is another wild, crazy guy.
My number one is Taxi Driver, another Martin Scorsese film, which feels like I'm just doing my own Martin Scorsese episode here, basically, with King of Comedy. And what is interesting, I didn't get to talk about Raging Bull quite yet, so I don't know if we're going to wait for that. We'll wait for that, because my number one is Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver has been a film I've been fascinated with for years. It's one of the first Scorsese films I ever watched before I watched Goodfellas, before I watched Mean Streets. One of the first DVDs I ever bought when I started collecting was Taxi Driver. And I've watched it so many times. And the character of Travis Bickle is so interesting and fascinating, because there's so many things within him. Like, is he a soldier with PTSD from Vietnam? Because we get a little bit of that in there. Is he just, a sociopath? Is he just delusional a la Rupert Pupkin, but just way more dangerous and has a vigilante vendetta against him that develops in the movie? You know what I mean? Is he socially unaware like Rupert Pupkin? It's very, very fascinating how those two characters connect with one another. But this film, what I like about this film most is its atmosphere. It's New York in the 70s. the dirty New York in the 70s. You know what I mean? Like the late nights drives through like the fog and the headlights and the neon signs and just, you know, the prostitutes and the pimps and just the degenerates kind of walking around the city and whatnot. And you get a sense of that. And there's also a great Bernard Herrmann score that penetrates throughout the movie, and it's absolutely fantastic. And Travis Bickle, you're inside his head with monologues and narration, but you also see stuff outside of his head as well, and what he perceives reality to be may not exactly be what reality is. It's a fascinating character study about a character who's not a I wouldn't call him a protagonist or even a straight up antagonist. He's a gray character, very gray. And the film, I think, kind of is a neo noir in that fashion, where it's a very, you know, grayish area with grayish morals and all that kind of stuff. You know, he's trying to save a young Jodie Foster character, but in doing so, he's got to commit murder. And in a way, it's also he wants to like sacrifice himself to save her, as if sacrificing himself is the ultimate victory, because maybe he doesn't have a reason to live beyond that moment. It's a really just fascinating movie that I can talk about forever, but I'll hand it off to somebody else.
Yeah. Did you not have Taxi Driver, Kirk?
No, that was my number 3.
Okay, so I have it as well. So I'll just go into mine and then I'll pass it off to you. Yeah, I mean, it just, I love it how you express the seedy side. New York was such a dirty place in the 70s, and Scorsese really kind of captured that whole vibe of the seedy, dirty side of New York, you know, with the pimps by Harvey Keitel and the hookers by Jodie Foster. She was like 12 or 13 years old. It was her first, I think it was like her first movie she had ever did, and she had to have her mother on set and stuff. And you know, like her mother's letting her play a freaking hooker, and it's like, what the heck is going on? And I've listened to an interview with her about it, and she says, yeah, they had no idea, but they looked at it as it's just dialogue. It's not like any of this is actually happening or any of this stuff, you know? And he just needed that to find something where he could look at, okay, this is what I need to do. I need to help this girl out, because he was lost at the beginning. And we, you know, Kirk and I have already discussed this a little bit on the Martin Scorsese episode, but I really can relate to him, and I know a lot of people can, because we're just kind of going day to day, going through life, we don't know what life is going to bring us. Where, you know, he was in the military, you know, it's hard. And I think De Niro captures this kind of like lost human being, you know, until he finally found a mission, and that was to save the Jodie Foster character from the Harvey Keitel character. But like you said, Andrew, I could go on and on about this all day, but Kirk, I want to give Kirk some time to talk too.
No, that's fine. Yeah, just off of what you were saying, Dan, I think what he does so great in this movie is he takes this kind of, you know, almost a despicable character. You know, he's really just doesn't really have much going on for him, but he does enough where he draws you in, and whether you like it or not, you do find something to connect with there, and it almost makes you complicit in what he does. And again, I love what Andrew said. I agree totally. Where, you know, it's almost like Bickle and Pupkin are two sides of the same coin. Just that very antisocial behavior, that delusion, and there's just that need to belong and find something to do with yourself. And he plays these characters so well. And just like I said, just that lack of, you know, not even knowing, like we talked about last time, like not knowing you're supposed to take a first date to a porn theater, you know, stuff like that. Just that, like, almost the point of like innocence, like where it's, you know, completely clueless about social things like that, but still having that desire to find somebody to cling to. Just it's a beautiful character and a beautifully acted character.
All right, so that means we are to my number one, which I'm assuming Andrew and both Kirk. Do you not have Raging Bull, Kirk?
I did not have Raging Bull in my 5.
I have,
but Andrew did. So Raging Bull, Jake LaMotta. I talked a little bit about this on the Scorsese episode. Jake LaMotta to me is a character that I relate to a lot. And people, how do you relate to that guy? Well, he reminded me a lot of my father. In my life growing up in Lowell, Massachusetts was not a fun life. We had a lot of abuse by my father. He was an alcoholic, and he really disrespected my mother and disrespected and abused all of us as kids. And so I look at Jake LaMotta as like my father in a lot of ways. Of course, my father wasn't a boxer, so that's the one good thing about Jake LaMotta he had going for him. He was a great boxer. He had an outlet for his anger by fighting. And his relationships with his wives and his brother were so reminiscent of my life growing up. The steak scene is like, bring me the steak. It's going to burn. And he just goes off the deep end over a steak. You know what I mean? And it's stuff like that. And then when he finds out his brothers, maybe he'll mess with his wife, one of his wives, and then he goes off on him. It's the guy has just got all this pent up anger in him. Obviously, the title is perfect, Raging Bull. The guy was a great fighter. I mean, though he had 5 or 6 fights with Sugar Ray Robinson, and that, like, Sugar Ray Robinson didn't even want to fight him. He ends up fighting him, but it was like he didn't have a choice. He couldn't. There was nobody else to fight him, and so he had to fight him. And that's why they kept fighting each other. But one of my favorite quotes in the movie, one of my all-time favorite quotes is, "You never got me down, Ray. You never got me down." No matter, he knew he was going to lose, but he still said, "You never got me down." And he got Ray down. He's gotten Ray down. He beat Ray, earlier in his career. But and then the transformation, like he's like got great boxing body and all this stuff, and then he all of a sudden by the framing sequences he had to gain 60 pounds for those scenes at the end and the beginning of the movie, which that is obviously Christian Bale is one thing. Nobody can compare with Christian Bale. Back in the day, losing weight, gaining weight, people didn't do a lot of that for roles. So that's De Niro just going to that extra level to get to that place he needed to go. So, Andrew, what do you got to say?
Well, Raging Bull is considered probably one of the greatest, or maybe the greatest film of the 1980s decade. Came out in 1980, coincidentally, another Martin Scorsese movie. And it's not only a great boxing movie, it's a great drama. It's a great, just well acted, extremely well made. The whole film is shot in black and white, which is something you hardly ever hear of, especially for like 1980 or even like, modern context. You never see you see hardly any films that are mainstream that are shot in black and white, but it was a stylistic choice for Martin Scorsese. Him being the super cinephile that he is, everybody's been hearing him in the news over the last couple of months talking about all of his, what's cinema, what's not cinema, all this kind of stuff. He's a student of cinema, and the way he shot it was just incredible. The boxing scenes feel so surreal. The one that Dan just mentioned, him fighting Sugar Ray Robinson, is that one scene where Robert Deniro just like he's on the ropes, he's just getting pummeled and just like there's cross cutting between him barely hanging onto the ropes and him being pummeled, and there's sweat and blood is like black because we're not using color. It's really just phenomenal filmmaking. That's what I really love about Raging Bull, is how well made it is and how gorgeous it looks aesthetically, and the acting is fantastic. This is Joe Pesci's kind of breakout role at the time. Yeah, and Joe Pesci, I think, was like a bouncer at like a club, and that's kind of where I think Scorsese or De Niro found him, and it's pretty much started Joe Pesci's career, which is pretty much tied directly to Martin Scorsese, because he was in Goodfellas, which is a film we none of us had mentioned, but he's more famously for his gangster roles. But this is not a gangster movie. It's kind of it's a biopic or a character film about a really interesting real life character in Jake LaMotta, who, like Dan said, is pretty much a shitty person, but he was a great boxer. And sometimes the best people that you can talk about or learn about or make movies about or whatever about are kind of really bad people in general. That's just kind of the way it goes. But yeah, I've always really liked Raging Bull. It's a film I highly recommend people to watch. Everyone recommends Rocky, which I think is fantastic, but Raging Bull I think has some more grit to it than Rocky does. And they're both, and one's based on a fictitious person, One's based on a real person, but they're both like different tones, completely different tones. One's hopeful, one's a life lesson.
You got any thoughts on Raging Bull, Kirk?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the reasons in our last episode we talked about why it didn't make my top 5 Scorsese movies. A lot of the same reasons why it didn't make my top 5 De Niro performances, and it's just because a lot of these other characters we talked about, Travis Bickle, Rupert Pupkin, Max Cady, you find something. He gives you something in those characters to latch onto, and like you were saying, Dan, the character Jake LaMotta is such a despicable character, and he's so self-absorbed, so filled with self-pity, and there's not a lot to like about him, and I don't connect with the character throughout the movie. Technically, it's a wonderful performance. Technically, it's a fantastic movie, but because of that, it's really difficult for me to connect personally with it.
Yeah, and the editing is Thelma Shoemaker, which she also edited The Irishman, and she's been working with Scorsese for 40 years since Raging Bull, I believe. Raging Bull was.
Yeah, I think that was her first work.
Yeah, and so I think there's a rumor that they think they're going to give her the Oscar for editing again after all these years. She's going to win an Oscar for editing for The Irishman. So we'll keep that. All right. So Kirk, you got any honorable mentions for Robert De Niro?
Yeah, I think we didn't mention Goodfellas, but I think he's solid in that movie. I mean, that's kind of the stereotypical role that he's got locked into, and like that we think about when we think of Robert De Niro. But I think that's out of those characters, that's the best one he's played. So that I think that deserves at least deserves to get mentioned. What else? And Raging Bull. I mean, that would be my number 6 or 7. I talked about why I didn't make the 5, but I mean that's definitely close. And what else do we have here? Jackie Brown was a nice departure. I enjoyed him in that. And also Bronx Tale, which he also directed. I think he played a really great character, and that is the father. Again, a blue collar, just kind of normal guy, which is something he usually doesn't do.
Andrew, you got some honorable
Goodfellas, like we just mentioned. That's more of a, I guess it's maybe why we didn't include it. It's more of a Henry Hill, Ray Liotta movie than I think it is a Robert De Niro movie. Another film I really like, doesn't get a lot of mention, is Midnight Run, a film he did in the 80s. Also Awakenings, I think is really underrated. Robin Williams also in that movie. There was another one here The Untouchables, where he plays Al Capone. Yeah. He's not in the movie too much, but he's really good in it when he is. He's also in Terry Gilliam's Brazil for a little while. But The Mission is a movie that I think doesn't get brought up enough. I think The Mission is a pretty solid movie. I almost included it on my list as kind of like a wild card pick, but I left it out. There's a lot of, there's also one that I want to mention, Once Upon a Time in America. The Sergio Leone movie, which is absurdly long. It's a very long movie.
Very long.
But he is very good in that movie.
Yeah, you guys named a lot of good ones. I mean, like, you guys have either had mine on your list already, or you guys have named them. So the only one that you guys haven't named, I think, is, I didn't say Goodfellas, but I think the better performance when it comes to those is Sam Ace Rothstein from Casino, where he is basically the main character of the film, and he does a much better job of like being the head guy, whereas in Goodfellas he's kind of like the side guy to Ray Liotta and maybe even Joe Pesci a little bit in that as well.
I would even I don't mean to cut you off, Dan, but I would even say Ronin is a really good film. John Frankenheimer's Ronin, which I forgot to mention.
One of the best car chases in movie. I'm a big car chase guy. I look for car chases in movies, and so because it's like a genre that I'm a big fan of, is car chases in movies. And when you find a good one, you latch onto it. Which so Ronin is one of those movies that I always think in my back of my head. Ronin got De Niro, but it's got a great car chase in it through like the narrowest little streets. I mean, you can't imagine how small these streets are that they're going through. I think it's in Paris, if I'm not mistaken, or Italy or someplace like that. But all right, so that looks like it's going to do it. Andrew, run down your 5.
My 5 is number 5 was actually I got to bring it back up, but
Sorry.
yeah, that's okay. The King of Comedy, and I'm my number 5. Heat was number 4. Number 3 was The Godfather Part 2. Number 2 was Raging Bull. Number 1 was Taxi Driver.
And where can you be found?
You can find me on Twitter at Cabzilla06, as well as my YouTube channel, Cabzilla Productions, as well as my podcast, along with my co-host Stephen Billings, called Cinema Discovery Project. It is available on Apple Podcasts.
And Kirk, run down your 5 to 1.
My top 5, I had number 5, Deer Hunter. Number 4, Godfather Part 2. Number 3, Taxi Driver. Number 2, Cape Fear. And number 1, The King of Comedy.
And where can you be found?
You can find me on Letterboxd. It's Kirk Kowal, Kowal. I'm also over all the Fan League and Movie Trivia Community Facebook pages. So track me down there if you're looking for me.
And I actually followed Kirk just before the show started on his Letterboxd. So, so maybe I can get a follow back. But,
you can criticize me just like everybody else does.
No, I don't criticize. I'm not that. So my 5 are, I put Jack Burns from Meet the Parents at 5, Max Cady from Cape Fear at 4, Rupert Pupkin at from The King of Comedy at number 3, Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver at number 2, and Jake LaMotta from Raging Bull at number 1. I just want to say thank you to everybody watching, and hopefully you guys see you guys later. For Andrew and Kirk, I can't even talk right now. So for Andrew and Kirk and myself, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night. Thanks, Dan.